Yo, what's going on, family? It's your boy T coming back at y'all again with another installment. In today's topic, I want to talk to you guys about capitalism. Is capitalism good? Now, y'all know how I do things. I like to break down these words so we get a little, like a better understanding of what they mean before we indulge in any further into definitions. So now, capitalism. Now, capitalism. The root word in capitalism is capital. Now, when you look at capital, this is in reference to like an asset, or you could say, you know, things that represent value. Let's just leave it as the representation of value. And ism is, as we already know, a suffix that denotes pertaining to. So when you look at the word capitalism, you could generally accept it to mean, pertaining to the value of things or something similar. So now let's read the definition. Capitalism, an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. So now capitalism is basically an economic and political system. The system consists of, as they say, private ownership, profit, which would be like decentralization rather than by the state, which would be centralization, a central, you know, planned economy or or state ownership. So many people of lately, they look at this system of capitalism as bad. You know, this is due to the theory of the exploitation, of workers, people that consume items, people that are buying things. They feel as if the worker could be taken advantage of, and the formation of monopolies can manipulate the prices. The theories of these private greedy owners, and it's all for profit. But really, what capitalism is, is a system of supply and demand. Actually relies on supply and demand for its survival. By supply and demand, I mean it's based on supplying or producing things that people want or that they need. Also, history shows that, when innovation is left to the innovators in a free market, we tend to see the best results through the competition. Now, what do I mean by this? Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you will understand that the competition is actually what drives the best results of the innovation. We see we tend to see the prices of things drop due to this competition in the free markets. You have one company that's producing a good or a service, and then you have another producing a good or a service. But in order for them to get more customers, usually what you'll see is that they'll lower their prices. This reduction of price makes people like to go to the cheaper, market. So this is that competition, and also it has this effect on the value of labor. Whereas in one employer may be paying his workers a set price, and then you have another employer paying it a bit higher. A lot of people would try to go and get that job that pays a higher price. Now, you can also negotiate in a free market. You could tell your employer, hey, I want a little bit of a higher wage. Now, if the employer feels as if you're valuable enough to give a higher wage, they'll give you that higher wage. Now, if they don't, it's up to you to either stay or go to that employer that offers a higher wage. This is the competition. So now, many people will ask, like, if capitalism is good, why has it failed in America? Why do we see such a disparity? Why is there such a small percentage of these private owners that have all the wealth, and then everybody else is either the working class or they're just in extreme poverty, like they're poor, they're either on drugs in the streets, a mixture of both. You have people who are facing mental illnesses in this country that needs help. Also, as I said, the monopolies, people say form from these private owners in the system, in the corporate system. But my answer would be it didn't really. Capitalism didn't fail America. True capitalism has always been the driving force to keep this country going. But true capitalism isn't widely practiced here. Here we currently have what's called state capitalism. Right, so now state capitalism. Now, what is state capitalism? Now, as we know, every time we see this word state, it's in reference to the community as a whole, or government, the public sector. And then when you look at the word capitalism, as we previously read, this word is insinuating private ownership. So theoretically, this word here is a contradiction because it's saying government private ownership. So unless there's a little something spooky in this government private ownership that we need to know about, it's really just a fancy way of saying socialism. So when you got state capitalism, it's really socialism as we read, government ownership and control. This is in reference to an economic system. So when you understand what socialism is when the government owns the means of production, which would be an economic system. It's the same thing, family. We can't be ignorant of these things. This is why the understanding of words is important. So now let's get to the definition. State capitalism is an economic system in which private capitalism is modified by a varying degree of of government ownership and control. As I said, state capitalism is really socialism or a transition to it. This is the rules and regulations that they set for taxation, tax exemption, uh, wage and labor requirements. This is all based on state ownership. Now, if you remember my previous videos, you would have a little bit of understanding of what state ownership, but let's pull up the definition. All right, state ownership. Now, if you remember, state ownership is a form of social ownership. Again, it's a government system, as it reads. State ownership, also called government ownership and public ownership, is the ownership of an industry, asset, or enterprise by the state or a public body representing a community as opposed to an individual or private party. So now let's stop. Again, as we see, this is the government ownership or the public ownership. Anytime you see that word public, it's in reference to the community as a whole. Now, our country, we are a constitutional federal republic. As the public, we elect representatives to execute our power, and they're called government. This is how they disguise these words, and we think that we are being represented with our best interest, but that's another topic and another video. But anyway, so now state ownership, as I said, is a form of social ownership, which is a Marxist theory. This consists of corporations and stocks, owned by the government, public enterprises. A good example of this is Facebook. Now, I know a lot of people would say, oh, Facebook is not owned by the government. If I Google right now who owns Facebook, it'll tell me Mark Zuckerberg. Now, this is true, but what it will also tell you is that, you know, Mark Zuckerberg is a majority shareholder. Currently, if I'm not mistaken, he owns about, 29, 30% of the shares of Facebook. He's not a sole owner. He doesn't own it per se by himself as one person. It is a public it is a public sector stock. It is what's the word I'm looking for? It is a public good. It is quote unquote social media. So now with that being said, that's just an example. Many people think these big corporations are owned by single people or a select few. Really, they're owned by the public. Like they're owned by the public through the stock market. Anybody could buy shares of these big corporations, and then they go through regulations and things of that nature. They're regulated by the government and funded through. If you remember in my previous video, it was called a central planned economy. A central planned economy is where basically the government choose who wins and who loses. The government chooses, who get funded during a, during any type of economic crisis, who get what type of funding. A central planned economy is basically government choosing who wins and who lose when it comes to economics. What businesses will get what investments or funding. Excuse me. In this system, it's like saying the government or the public, as they would say, is the investor. They use our tax dollars or money from the central bank to pay for these investments or you know whatever business or corporation they see fit within their central planned economy. For example, the Green New Deal. Government wants to invest into green energy, so they must raise taxes or borrow money to fund this investment. This is, as I said, a central planned economy. They want to take the funding from fracking and then place it into green energy. Now, this sounds okay. It actually sounds as if this state capitalism is beneficial for keeping things in check while we get a better standard of living. Well, that would be in a perfect world. As I said, with the central planned economy, we give the politicians the okay to regulate and make up the rules for our economy, like any form of business that comes up. Really, I mean, all state capitalism bring is a corrupt system. This corrupt system is called crony capitalism. Crony capitalism. And for starters, let's just read the definition. Crony capitalism is an economic system in which individuals and businesses with political connections and influence are favored as through tax breaks, grants, and other forms of government assistance in ways seen as suppressing open competition in a free market. So now, with that in mind, we see that this is not, as I said, a true form of capitalism. It is called crony capitalism, or as you could say, phony capitalism. That's how I like to say it. Now, this is the system that we actually have going on right now in our country. This is what everybody are against. Now, people abusing this state capitalism, which is really a form of socialism, a trickery of words, really. What they do is they use this crony capitalism and flip the script, so to say, and have people believe that this is why capitalism doesn't work. When in reality, they're not practicing capitalism. They're practicing socialism and just calling it capitalism. Now, as I said, family, the way these people use words, we have to be very, very mindful when they use them. We have to understand through in and throughout what these words mean. So now, as I said, state capitalism only brings in crony capitalism. Now, why do I say that? Because in crony capitalism, instead of free exchange between individuals controlling the economy, you know, government invests out tax dollars and, money from the central banks into businesses and corporations that lobby for government and institutions. They also, give campaign contributions and things of that nature, whatever would seem like bribery. Now, in return, these enterprises, as read, are favored for tax breaks, grants, and other forms of government assistance off the back of the working class, people paying taxes. High taxes for the rich and corporate taxes will always be evaded by the people with these political connections. Because, I mean, they're the ones that's in the pockets of these people. Also, promises or deals can be made concerning family members or associates to gain positions of power in government or these corporations due to this crony capitalism. Now, I mean, just to give y'all an example of that, this is a good reason, for example, why people are so concerned about Biden, for example, when it came down to his dealings in Ukraine when he was the vice president. Basically, the way I look at it is, I'm just looking at it at face value, not trying to be somebody picking and choosing, but it does look funny, and this is an example of that crony capitalism. Now, Biden, while vice president, was given the okay by Obama to head the operations in Ukraine. Now, as Biden goes to Ukraine, all of a sudden his son gets a position on the executive board for a Ukrainian oil company. Now, whatever else anybody have to say about that, situation, they could run with that. My thing though is how, if he had zero experience in that field, it's because of crony capitalism, making business deals, certain, you know, government assistance, or, it could just be off the merit of political connections. I personally look at that as funny, especially seeing how the man is talking about ending fracking in our country. Now, yeah, he could be pushing for solar energy, which is a whole nother topic, but at the same time, where would we get our oil from? We don't just use oil for we don't just use oil for gas, for power. Oil is essential for machinery overall. So where will we get it? Will we be making deals with Ukraine to get oil? Leave that up to y'all to think about, family. Till next time.